Today's episode was recorded in front of a live audience at WSA in New York City and was co-presented with the New Museum, New Ink, and Water Street projects. Please be sure to check out our other episodes, including one with Atlanta music icon Jermaine Dupri, on which he talks about the rise of Atlanta culture in the 1990s and early aughts with a cultural anthropologist. Don't forget to click subscribe, and please rate the show on your podcast platform of choice. This is Sing for Science Labs. I'm your host, Matt White. Each episode in this series brings together artists and scientists to explore one topic of shared interest. Today's topic is nurturing ideas in children, and our guests are Questlove and developmental psychologist Dr. Susan Engel. Ahmir Questlove Thompson is an Academy Award-winning filmmaker, 6-time Grammy Award-winning drummer, DJ, producer, and New York Times best-selling author. His debut children's picture book, The Idea in You, is a celebration of joy and imagination for children and was written to inspire kids to find and follow their own creative voice. Dr. Susan Engel is a psychology professor at Williams College and is considered a pioneer for her groundbreaking research on curiosity in children. Her books include The End of the Rainbow, How Educating for Happiness, Not Money, Would Transform Schools, The Hungry Mind, The Origins of Curiosity in Childhood, and The Intellectual Lives of Children. The current focus of her lab's research is exploring how kids come up with ideas. New Museum and Water Street projects, please join me in welcoming Questlove and Dr. Susan Engel.
Matt, I just want to say of all the nerdy introductions I've ever heard in my life, that was wonderfully the nerdiest of all time.
I'll take it.
I don't even think we should do this. I want to get to the Moe's Tavern thing immediately.
Oh, yeah.
With Hank. Yeah.
We'll be early, but we can go now.
Okay. How's it going?
So, thank you. I'd like to start by reading from the note that you wrote at the back of the book.
Okay.
In that note, you wrote, I learned in my childhood how to find the ideas within myself and find ideas within the world that I could connect back to myself. It's important for me to try to show kids the way to do that. Ideas are what the future needs, and it all starts with encouraging our youngest minds. So I think for my own edification, everyone else's, could you describe your childhood in greater detail, specifically what environment supported those ideas?
Well, as it was told to me via my mother, my father, and also my birth doctor, who I'm still in contact with now. So I believe the story is my birth doctor, Dr. Gordon, who was a fan of my father's work. My father was an oldies doo-wop singer from the 50s. He would regularly check up on my progress after I was born in January of '71. And I believe the story is maybe like when I'm 1 or 1.5, Gordon pulls my mother aside, and basically he's interested in the kind of creative epigenetic effect. Will I develop a musical talent like my father? What are my characteristics in terms of creativity? And he told her something. He's like, well, I encourage you to, and this is like new ideas back in like 1970, you know, he was seen as like, you know, one of those hippies. That's how my dad used to describe it. Like, you know, yeah, Dr. Gordon, he was like, you know, air quotes, one of those hippies. Yeah, I know what you mean, Dad. Yeah, exactly. So, long story short, basically, Gordon told my mom, like, don't reprimand him if you see him doing anything creative. And that means playing in his food. If he puts it on his face and his hair, like let him explore. If he wants to draw on the walls, if he wants to, whatever, like let him do it. And of course, I come from a long line generation of plastic on the furniture families, So, yeah, and I even asked my parents, like, so how did that work out? And they were basically like, by the age of 2, we realized like we had to get you a drum to hit, because your thing was like just hitting all the furniture in the house. So I would hit the lamps. I guess I thought they were symbols, and you hit it hard enough, and then the light bulb explodes, and then
sounds like a symbol.
Yeah. So that was just unheard of back in the early 70s, because most kids come in this world with no, don't, can't. Not to mention to be raised by Emmett Till era parents, pretty much, generational fight or flight. Also, the idea of safety, don't speak unless spoken to. You don't have an opinion. Like the thing about hip hop is the thing that like gives someone under the age of 21 an opinion or a voice, which is why I think it spread like wildfire. But pretty much like my parents let me run rampant as far as like creativity is concerned. And then I chose drums.
So do you think that, do you attribute your current relationship to ideas to that upbringing? I mean, the sheer amount of content that you produce on a daily basis is staggering,
Wait, I knew this moment was going to happen. So normally I don't pick my afro out as much anymore. Like post-pandemic, I love the whole idea of me walking and not, well, I know I'm recognizable, but in my mind, I'm delusional. Like, oh, wear braids. Someone told me not to pick my afro out because I use tea tree oil. So I don't want you guys thinking like I'm getting sentimental and starting to cry, but tea tree oil is now getting inside my pores.
Okay, it's happening.
Which is the equivalent of like 10 onions here.
Got it.
Yeah, so at the age of 3, I used a spoon on the pots, and that's how I discovered drums. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I will edit this to include your explanation, I promise.
I'm sorry. Repeat your question again. Can I get a napkin though? Like the tears are.
Yeah. We got this.
Wait, sidetrack. One time I went on a date and we saw the Joy Luck Club, and I think I rubbed my eyes with like butter in the popcorn, and then suddenly I started tearing up, and she thought that I was crying over like an incidental scene. And that explained why she didn't call me like in 3 years. So.
Okay. I thought it was going to go the other direction.
Right? No, she was like, "Are you crying?" No, it's popcorn. Yeah, right. So
I was asking you about that background and how it relates to your current relationship of ideas, because when I heard that you were writing this book, it didn't faze me in the least, because I identify you with just like such a huge output of ideas and imagination, and it's just such a diverse body of medium. So when I'm curious kind of about your own relationship to it, and also, you mentioned in the book the idea of an inner child. So it's like, this is a kid's book, your relationship to that inner child, to your experience. Do you see a connection between how you work with imagination now and back then?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm always full of ideas, and I think once the pandemic came, especially 2020, that whole entire year of quarantining, isolated on a farm with no TV access, really turned me into, you know, just a constant 10 to 12 hour a day machine of just creativity, which is kind of where like Summer of Soul and the other books, and there's 3 other projects. Like I did about 8 things during the year of 2020 that are now just slowly coming out now. But to be specific, this was the year I decided to like face real fears. And I think anytime the subject of children, even having them, or, you know, the amount of no's I've given to, hey, come to my school and talk to my kids, and, you know, kids, you know, like, I would avoid them, because, I mean, kids are like really honest. I had one situation, like, oh my God. So as I speak this, it's just hitting me now that today might be the anniversary. This is when our 3rd album, Philadelphia Half-Life, came out, and I let one of my teacher assistant friends con me into like, come on to class and say something nice to the kids. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm important. Let me come and say. And it was a disaster for me, because like the first question was like, do you know any real celebrities like Andre 3000? And I walked in. Who said that? So what I did was I kind of made a list at the top of this year. I don't believe in resolutions and all those things, but usually around December I'm addicted to making lists and achievements and all those things, like usually manifestation lists. But this year I wanted to do something different and face a fear and actually do things that were an automatic no. And writing a book for children is way more challenging than, you know, I could talk about 500 of my favorite records of all time with no problem. Like, you can follow me on Instagram and see the paragraphs I write for that. But this was one of those face my fear challenges thing. And I think my fear was like a lot of the times when we fear something, it's 80-90% of the time things that never ever happen. You know, I'm afraid to get on an airplane. Like, you've never been in an airplane crash ever. You know what I mean? Like, just things that we generally fear never happens. So I think I just had this thing of writing this book and a bunch of 5-year-olds just having a burning session, like, you're not Andre 3000? Yeah. You know, so.
I don't think that's going to be a problem.
I want to say first, I love your book. So I got the book last week, and I've been doing work on this topic for quite a number of years. And when I opened your book and started to read it, I finally thought, I finally have a colleague, someone who's interested in the same thing I'm interested in. Because there aren't many scientists who are interested in this topic. So I'm grateful.
Well,
but you're welcome. Oh, maybe I'm not holding this up.
There we go.
But I have a question for you. If you are wary of kids, what made you want to write a book for them?
I am, so right now just completed my 2nd movie, which deals a lot with self-sabotage and knowing when to get out your own way. And I think mid-filming, I realized that my roadblock was always creating more obstacles, like more work and more work. Like this whole reputation of like, Questlove, you do so much and you have so many jobs and da-da-da-da. Like, that's something that was formerly seen as honorable. Like, my dad would be proud, like, look at that boy go, he got 12 jobs, you know? But again, I would like to be, hopefully we're in the age now where, well, despite what's happening in the world, and I mean, I have my own theories about whenever moments like these occur, usually it seems like it's the dawning of something new, but if you kind of look at history, this is always the end of a period. you know, like when Woodstock came, oh man, it's the generation of love. No, it was, Woodstock marked the end of a period. Even musically, like 77 when Saturday Night Fever came out, that was the end of a period. If you look at when Michael Jackson's Thriller came out, kind of the end of a period. A slow end, but we know how that story ends. And I have other examples. I hopefully would like to think that maybe the end of the generational trauma, fight or flight, survive by any means, get money by any means. Like, even in hearing you say the idea of happiness over money, I don't think it's an accident that we're watching kind of all the establishing figures that we once idolized and look up to slowly fall one by one. A lot of us, I think 2020 was the sort of the cosmic warning. Like, either you pivot and you change for the better, or you do something different than what you've been taught, or you I mean, I don't want to make it like doom and gloom, like suffer the consequences, but that's clearly what we're seeing. So, you know, as someone who was taught to overachieve, overwork, you know, hoard all the money you can, now I kind of wish that, and I don't think the opposite of that is chasing happy either, because I think that's the problem. Like, there's over, 60, 70 noted scientific emotions, but we only like happy. You know, when dark emotions come, then it's like, oh, I don't know what to do. And that's when you start self-medicating and self-soothing and all that stuff. So, long story short, I guess I realized mid-filming of the doc I just completed, where my blind spots were, which then kind of made me want to, like, it's easy for me to point out this artist's blind spot and that artist's blind spot. So once I started seeing that in myself, I think half the job of life is just one foot in front of the other. You know, the idea of like, well, I'm not ready yet, or perfection. Like, I'm trying to lose that. So anyway,
well,
I hope that made sense.
Well, I've heard you say the same thing on Trevor Noah, because you were saying, like, and it may have been about, I think what you were saying is you attribute a lot of your success and the root's success to showing up one foot in front of the other. And it made me think of this book that Jeff Tweedy from Wilco wrote recently called How to Write One Song. And it was like demystifying it. It's like you show up.
I need that. My biggest fear is this next Roots album.
Oh, okay.
That's my biggest fear, because if someone is like the poster child from running away from a good song or a hit or a perceived hit or whatever, like, it's this guy. Because again, half of our fears are literally 80 to 90% of things that will never happen in his lifetime. And so me having this idea of like a bunch of tomatoes being thrown at us, it's like, I created that thought in my head, but it's never happened. So, yeah, well, as soon as we're done this, I want to read that book, because it shouldn't take 10 years to make an album.
Well, I think you've been pretty busy.
I've made myself busy. So.
Well, Susan, I'm curious, when you're reading that book and you see all these points of resonance, just saying like, finally I have a colleague who just, we're on the same level here. So what are some of the parts of the book that made that come out, that have kind of backed up the things you've known as a researcher?
Well, the main thing is the idea that kids can have ideas, which I know there's some educators in the room, but actually, if you spend as much time in schools as I do, you'll see that most schools don't treat children as if they're capable of having ideas. And it's strange because we think, I teach at the college level, we think that what we're teaching them to do is think, but then we don't give them much space or time or encouragement for thinking. So that's the main thing, is that the main idea of the book is the main idea I've been trying to do research on for all these years. But I would say that the other piece of it, and I looked at it again before I came, is that you treat ideas and encourage children to treat ideas as a thing. If it's a song, then it's easy to recognize it as a thing. If your song is an idea or your painting is an idea, that's easier for us to connect to. I'm interested in ideas that don't have a concrete form. Like, yeah.
Well, I think probably the number one thing I learned maybe in the last 2 or 3 years is when you're in a state of play. Yes. And I know it sounds like real cliche, like, you know, that's the thing, to hear Michael Jackson say, like, you know, to have a child's mind, to have, you know, then it just sounds like, whatever. But I realized, like, that's the number one thing. So the thing I started doing, which, you know, I never went public with it, I've been throwing kind of these underground speakeasy game nights, just with like my peers. And that's the main reason why I do it. And, you know, I get singers and writers and doctors, like, I make sure it's like an eclectic mix of people. And usually, like, first timers are really, really thrown off. Like, they get to the house and first they're disappointed, and then they're glee, like, wait, we're really gonna play games? Like, there was one particular figurehead who had, like, their security detail come over and start sweeping the place. And this was in LA, and the person said, so where's your medic at? And I was like, my medic? It's like, yeah, where's the medic gonna be? I was like, why would I have a medic? And then someone explained to me, like, you know, because it's LA and if something happens. And I was like, no, we're here to play. And the way they laughed at me.
Oh, really?
Oh, God. They were like, wait, y'all really here to play games? And I was like, yeah, it's game night. And they, for like 3 minutes, I almost ended it because it instantly triggered me back to, like, getting teased when I was like 5 or something. And it was like a Bob Newhart phone call on the other end. They were like, yeah, no, dog, it's Monopoly. No, for real, it's Monopoly. Like, literally, that's how they broke it down. But my whole, and the thing is, when the person came and they too were like expecting a Hollywood party thing and got there and was like, wait, you here to play games? But by the end, they all said, like, we never thought we could have the time of our lives doing something so wholesome and nerdy. And now it's like, when's the next one? When's the next? But my whole thing is that, you know, we just been trained to work and work and work and achieve. And you gotta get to a state of play. And that's where the ideas come in. So.
Well, the thing is, it's interesting to hear you talk about game night as opposed to making music, because when you watch kids play, what for them feels so playful, so intense, so exciting and absorbing is the very moment when they're developing an idea. So I would guess, I don't know.
Well, there's the jam session.
Yeah.
But I'm often the bad guy in the jam session, and at that I'm also very calculating. Yeah. Like, I'm more comfortable when I'm in control. You know, I'm in a band with 10 people, and all right, that's enough soloing. All right, go to the verse. Like, I'm more of a traffic cop than I am a musician. So that said, usually in a state of play. And actually it shows me a lot about people. Like, and I've teased Trevor about this on his podcast. Like, Trevor is like a stickler for the rules, and we must follow the rules. And, you know, Michael Che will just, any excuse to flip the table over, like, game over. Like, that's what he is. But you know, I think now, a year later, those regulars now get like the importance of just doing something. And it doesn't have to be games. Like, my favorite thing now is doodling. I'm not traditionally an artist, but I have a billion just like construction paper or just blank books and colors and watercolors and crayons or whatever, and just doodle for no reason,
For the sake of it, not for an end
just
result.
as an exercise,
Yeah.
a creative exercise. So,
And that's what you said, Susan. I read that you said something like ideas love leisure.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, it comes from research about when very young children talk to their parents and ask them questions. And when we count how long those conversations are and how lofty the topics, it comes from some old research in England. The longest conversations, the ones that created the most what we call cognitive stretch in the kids, like got them to think the most, were when they weren't doing anything else at all. At the dinner table or sitting around on the couch, and it goes back to your game night. And so I didn't develop it, I just blurted out one day in a talk that ideas love leisure. And one of the mistakes of schools, and also of the way we construct our work lives as adults, is to make everything so rushed and so product-oriented and so goal-oriented that we forget that you don't, I mean, whether it's, like I said, whether it's a piece of music or an idea, a philosophical idea, a scientific idea, you can't do it when you're rushing all the time and when you're focused all the time on an end point. And children, I mean, you see that all the time when you watch children play, because that's when they do all their work. I mean, the real intellectual work, not the skill work, but the thinking work. So that's why I said it. Ideas love leisure, and as a grown-up, you can make it, you're lucky enough, not everybody is, but you're lucky enough to make a decision about when you're going to let loose, when you're going to be the, whatever you said, the director telling everyone what to do. But I mean, the thing that I took very seriously from your book, because I'm your opposite about kids. Like, that's what I love the most. And we don't take seriously our responsibility to help them become capable of having ideas. And they're not in control of it in our kind of life, in the society we live in. They don't have that much control once they get to school. So if grown-ups don't give them a chance to develop their ideas, so your parents did, but lots don't.
I think usually we lose that at, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, I think by the age of 8, where the transition starts is you go from, usually by 6 or 7, there's an intuitive thing inside you that suddenly learns how to please an adult. Like, you know what's going to get you in trouble, you know what's going to get you attention. But the seeds of people pleasing sort of come into play, and then
way before that, I'm just telling you.
Well, I was lucky
3.
Well, I'm just thinking of usually like to be cynic or to be embarrassed or shy. That for me started to happen maybe like around like 8. So maybe I was lucky to get that long of a stretch. Maybe that's what got me here now. But, you know, kids learn quick in terms of when to turn it on and when to shut it off. And that's kind of when you lose yourself. And your idea about schools is correct, because, I mean, luckily my parents, when I was... from elementary school. There wasn't such a thing as a performing arts school for elementary kids. So the school I went to was like a brand new idea where we were encouraged to do those types of things. But even then, like, going to that school, like, a lot of my neighborhood friends made me feel like I was an alien or an outcast, because, like, y'all do what in school? Like, you know, before I had to, before I played drums, like, I had to learn to tap dance first. And so,
Didn't all the great drummers, like Chuck, I'm serious, like Chuck Webb and like
Yeah, no,
That was what you did.
Absolutely, but you know, to live in late '70s era West Philly with tap shoes on was not the move.
Yeah.
No, but it is, and hopefully getting rid of that gene, that shield of embarrassment or shyness. I think around 8, I had a really good singing voice, and somehow I just psychologically buried that talent into the point where, like, I can't sing, you know. But I do know it's the gene of hiding in plain sight, which, you know, I clearly did well in the last 5 decades of my life. So I'm just learning now to strip myself of all those things. Yeah.
So, well, it seems to me like I read another thing that you said, Susan, which is like there's this stark contrast between imaginative behavior in like 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds. Is that right? Or kindergarten and 5th grade?
I was talking about curiosity, which, is this right?
Yep. Perfect.
So I study curiosity, and children who are 2 and 3 ask about 2 questions a minute. And that's documented. Even the least curious child asks 1 question a minute. And most of that is at home. If you record those very same kids when they go to school, they ask maybe 3 to 4 questions in a 1 or 2 hour time period. And my research shows, because we followed them till they were in 5th grade, that by 5th grade you can watch a classroom, even really nice classrooms, friendly teachers, nice books, but you can go through 2 hours and not hear one single actual question from a kid. So when it comes to curiosity, there's this sudden drop-off. And we know from research that it's not that, you could argue that maybe, like you said, when you're 8, you become more self-conscious. I don't know if that's true or not, but you could argue that it's inevitable that everyone becomes less curious at around age 4 or 5, but it's not, because we know from research that in certain circumstances, kids show a lot of curiosity. So the question is, why aren't they curious at school, where they have all this access to things that they could delve into, whether it's music or rocks or dinosaurs or, potions or books? So it's not inevitable, but it's dramatic.
I had a conversation with last year was the 50th anniversary of hip hop, and I did this thing for the Grammys with all these hip hop legends, and I had a good conversation with Grandmaster Flash, and he's like kind of marveling at me talking musical arrangements down with the roots, and he was like, man, man, when I was in 3rd grade, all of us had like some sort of creative process, like music or some sort of art, and then like around like 72, 73, 74, with the Nixon administration, they started cutting those programs off, and then only specialty schools had those things. And it's kind of weird that pretty much hip hop is the kind of the hip hop culture is the result of, something so beautifully innovative came from the fact that every hip hop legend I ever met was like, man, I wanted to play the saxophone, but they stopped teaching us that in school, So we had to kind of, the whole lemon lemonade theory of make something out of nothing. But yeah, mostly now,
but
my observation is that schools are training us to be workers,
right,
not thinkers.
I totally agree. But those people that you're talking about, including yourself, are people with great talent and a great drive, a great appetite for the work you do. And the trouble is, not everybody has that talent or that drive. So you could argue that, robbed of the musical instruments, some very gifted people figured out another way to make music. But I wouldn't use that as a policy, because it doesn't drive everyone to invention. It drives plenty of people into submission. So,
But I do. There was one point when I thought, I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Rudd, his books. He's written a book called The Gene Keys. There's a few other, Richard Rudd. I actually believe, I too thought that like the way that the world was created, like, you know, 1 out of 4,000 people was the, you know, the special one. Like, okay, well, Michael Jordan, you're the special one. You're the special one. But I believe that we all have that level of talent, but it just depends on the degree of how we subconsciously hold ourselves back to those degrees. You know what I mean? And so I don't think it's a thing of like, well, not all of us have the talent. I actually believe that like any of us here has the capacity to sit at a piano and do Stravinsky's Rites of Spring, even though, you know, it's a very complex piano, you know what I mean? But I believe that it's inherently in us, but.
Well, but I don't agree with you about that, because I don't think everybody has equal talent. I could, in every domain, or even some people just don't have towering ability. That's what I think. But nevertheless, my point was that you can't count on the innovation of the really talented kids to thrive even when the musical instruments are taken away from them, like you were describing. Because whether they have great talent or not, whether they're geniuses or not, everybody can have an idea. And that's the point in your book. And that's the point for me about children. You don't have to just pick out the really brilliant ones or the really lively ones. Every single kid can have an idea, and every kid, and this is what I took from your book, for every kid, it can be nurtured. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely
even if
agree.
they don't become...
That's why I wrote it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
But didn't, Susan, you said something to me, you said that neither, based on your research, neither income nor privilege has the effect on kids' inventive lives that we might think. Is that right?
I don't remember saying that, but I agree. I'm just finished a new book on kindergarten, and I traveled all across the country looking at kindergartens. Really amazing experience, and 5-year-olds are really great. But one of the most interesting, powerful things I discovered was that privilege did not account for where the really good learning was going on at all. Good classrooms had good teachers doing certain things that seem essential to the very thing you're talking about, to kids, to the idea that every kid had an idea in them. And some teachers can do that, and some teachers don't seem to know how to do it. And it doesn't have to do with the privilege of the kid or the privilege of the school system. Not to say that it's okay for schools to be without those resources, but that's not what accounts for kids developing their ideas.
So what does?
Nurturing it and giving it space. But the nurturing part, I think, is more important for some kids than other kids, and that's what the research shows. So if you're, like, if anybody here was or has the kid who's, or like you, if you were drumming on everything, I predict that you would have drummed on everything, even if your parents had been more restrictive, because you had a driving need to do it. Kids who are more inhibited or shyer or less voracious in their appetite for knowledge, they're the ones that are more easily dissuaded from exploring the world and trying things out. So the less inherently talented you are, the more you need an environment where people are not only encouraging you to do it, but giving you some guidance or input or materials or opportunity.
Can I ask a question? Okay. So I have a theory, and this is more the adult version of what you said about privilege and not privilege and the idea of developing a talent. So I have a theory. All of my musical heroes who had very restricted access to ways of creating for me, have created some of the best art ever. And it's always when they hit pay dirt and get successful, and then they upgrade. You know, they have millions of dollars, so now let me buy that, you know, that studio compound, or, you know, let me record at this luxury studio. Like, these are people that have like done MacGyver levels of, like, you know, like a shoestring, you know, just 2 wires, and did something that changed my life. And then they upgrade, and then it's never the same. Like, I've never seen an artist like upgrade and the quality remain the same. And I know this is subjective, but my whole thing is, like, I always encourage acts I see now, especially the acts that come on the Tonight Show that I really like. And I'm like, all right, yes, I do encourage a linear journey and trying out different things, but, you know, try to resist, you know, the need to upgrade your environment, because, you know, clearly you've mastered this thing. Like, try to juice it for all you can. But can I ask you, do you believe that better ideas, and again, it's subjective, that better ideas come from people who don't have privilege as opposed to those that are well equipped with, you know, the monetary means to do whatever they want to do?
I can just tell you what I think as another grown-up. I don't have any expertise in that.
Yeah, and I said it's subjective.
Yeah,
so.
For me too. So money doesn't help anything. I mean, wealth, that's not true. One of my sisters is here, and she used to have a friend who said, rich or poor, it's good to have money, and it is. Everybody needs some money. But wealth certainly doesn't make anybody better at anything. And I would go further than that, and there is research to back this up. What you described to me is a person who takes their eye off the process of invention and drops their eye on what they're going to get from it. And the minute you think about extrinsic rewards, this is very well documented with kids as well as grown-ups, you stop liking the thing you're doing as much. And, you know, I won't bore you with the explanation of why that's so, but so I bet if you're seeing that, it's because people start thinking about their wealth and fame, and they're not alone in the room with the thing, the words, the instruments, the paint, the idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you said, Susan, that, correct me if I'm wrong, you said every idea solves a problem.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So I used to study curiosity, and then I was watching kids play, and I realized that they weren't always trying to find something out. Some of the time they were making something, and that led to my interest in invention and how children come to invent. And then that led to my interest in how children develop ideas, which it turns out they're pursuing ideas at a much earlier age than we thought they were, and very hefty ideas. But then I started to think about, and I wanted to ask you this too, people started to ask me, other scientists, what do you mean by an idea? Like, what do these things have in common? And what they all have in common is that in each case, you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to find out why the bug crawled out from under the rock. You're trying to figure out how you can make something to catch the bug or the lizard or whatever it is a kid is trying to catch. And ideas always solve a problem too. How can I express my love or my fear with these colors or with these notes? Or what can I do to make the economic system work better, or in many cases work worse? I mean, ideas come in all shapes and sizes. But in all those cases, it's the urge to solve a problem. And you know, the way that I talk about this with my students is, the problem with the problem we give kids is they're not their problems. In order to come up with a good solution to your problem, it has to be a problem to you. And there's a wonderful novelist called Allegra Goodman, and she told me once that every novel she writes is an answer to a question she's asked herself. And that had a huge impact on me, because after that I thought, yeah, and every study I do is to answer a question I have, and every book I write is to figure something out I hadn't figured out. And I don't know, tell me what you think.
Well, now you have me pondering every creative thing I've ever done.
Yay!
So this is like Jeopardy. I'm looking for. I've created things, but I never knew that I was answering a question that I haven't thought to ask. All right, I'm gonna go home and think about that.
Okay.
Well, like when you pick up construction paper to just doodle your free time. I mean, Susan, what's one possible problem that would be solving?
Nervous energy. I'm a doodler too. Mine aren't worth keeping, but you know, there are a lot of reasons people do things. I don't. But the minute, and this is something I loved in the book, really loved, and my 5-year-old grandchildren loved it too, so kids do like your book. But you can watch kids kind of trip over the problem they're solving. You know, they're playing with the water and they're throwing it around and they're watching the drops fall, or they're seeing how hard they can sweep it off the table, or whatever they're doing. And at some point, it becomes a problem. The problem is, why is water here and not here? Or can I build the water up without any walls? Or what can I put in the water and what will happen to it? So they discover the problem, and then their process changes, and they become more deliberate.
So you're saying that cause and effect is the first step in kids' curiosity?
That's great.
What happens if I put this fork in the...
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I have a great slide of just that thing, and the kids survived it. But,
Oh, God.
yes.
Susan, we're just about out of time here, but I want to know specifically maybe which passage, which line here from Ahmir's book you think that, I think there was one about this one that I liked a lot, that I found this very thought-provoking. Stand by. Your idea may need more salt.
Yeah.
You might shed a tear, taste it again, feel something new. And I'll just say what I thought about was just the phenomenon of mood. You know, like how one day a recording can sound really fast to you, and the next day it can sound really slow. You know what I mean? But Susan, I think you took something a little bit different that was more specific to your research.
Yeah, well, one of the, I could go through every page in the book, but at the end you say to kids, you don't know what will happen to your idea. It will go out into the world. And that's another piece of this, which is this sense that your ideas have a life of their own. They take on a life of their own. And for kids, but I think for many adults who are not you, who do not have the audiences you have, to think that your idea, in whatever form it is, lands with someone or changes their mind or gives them their own thought, it's a very powerful idea. And think about how terrible it is if kids don't get the chance to experience the fact that they might have an idea that's going to have an impact on somebody else. I really love that part.
Thank you. I'm glad you received that, because I think like my addiction to Pixar as the answer, because really, come on, we all know that Pixar is really made for us, but they just act like it's for kids. Sure. And I think, you know, it circles back to the idea, the dedication of like me doing this for my 5-year-old self, which I'm discovering him now, like somewhere frozen and thawing out, is the 5-year-old version of me that like really did love music and, you know, wasn't numb to it as I was 5-6 years ago. But yeah, I think I'm glad you picked up the salt component, because for me, a lot of food metaphors. But yeah, I think it's also important, and this circles back to the whole idea of like only chasing happy. Like if the result is happy, then good. You know, we need to have a better relationship with our darker emotions too, like, and how to express it. That's the problem. Like when a dark emotion comes, then it's an unhealthy way to express it.
Yeah.
And so and it's also meant to like not discourage yourself. And I'm often a victim of that. Like the amount of people that come up to me now to say something I did 19 years ago or even 9 months ago, like that affected me or that changed my life. And I used to be the guy under the impression that everything I did just didn't matter. And it wasn't until like Summer Soul was the first time in which people were going like way over the top over something I did. And in my mind, I was like, man, like I wasn't as, like when I'm making music, I was so calculating. Like I would start an album, I would write the record review and what my rating was and sort of work backwards. Like, okay, I'm gonna write, this is my Pitchfork rating, and this is my Metacritic score, and man, Matt Thompson really produced, you know, like I would literally work backwards. And having a beginner's mind with making movies was sort of like, okay, I'm just along for a ride. Like, what happens next? And somehow it hit pay dirt. So now that I realized, well, I hope I don't realize, but now that I'm quasi-aware of that's the magic zone, like now everything I create has that beginner's mind again, which I haven't had almost in 20 years. Because it's like once you get in this industry, then suddenly you're thinking about like, okay, I brought my mom a house, so I got to keep up these payments for at least 6 years. So I need a hit, and I got to produce this record and do those DJ gigs, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then suddenly it becomes a burden, and I don't want that anymore. So, yeah.
Well, I can't thank you both enough. This is really incredible, and thank you for writing this book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you to all of you, to WSA, New Ink. Thank you so much. Be sure to order your copy of Questlove's book, The Idea in You, wherever books are sold. For more information, please visit questlove.com. Keep an ear out for Susan's forthcoming book, American Kindergarten, and you can now purchase her most recent, The Intellectual Lives of Children, wherever books are sold. Sing for Science is co-produced by Talkhouse and made possible in part by a grant from the Simons Foundation. Our music is by Panoram. Social media manager is Bailey Constas. Digital producer is Keenan Cush, and location camera and sound was by Dylan McDougall and Mason Wilson. Special thanks to Captain Kirk Douglas, Salome Sega, and everyone at New Ink and Water Street Projects. If you like Sing for Science, the best way you can support us is to give us a review, tell a friend about the show, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. For more information, please visit singforscience.org and follow us on social media at Sing for Science. Thanks for listening.